You're listening to the Second Look podcast, where we take a closer look at what we're learning each Sunday at Connection Church to help you grow in your walk with Christ. Here are your hosts, Pastor Joe Terreri and Pastor Dan DeRochers.
Welcome to the Second Look. My name is Dan.
And my name is Andrew.
And we're here talking about wisdom and wealth. But first, hello and good morning, Andrew Vancott.
Oh, good morning, Dan DeRochers. It's good to be here.
I'm so glad you're here this morning. Andrew, I have a question for you.
Okay.
It's more of a comment. Andrew, you like a good deal.
I actually love a good deal.
Anyone that knows the Vancott family knows that your family DNA is motivated by a good deal.
It's funny. It's not actually Angela's. My wife's parents aren't like that, and my parents aren't necessarily like that. Somehow Angela and I we got together and we're like, hey, what's the deal?
Literally. Tell me about one of your recent pursuits for a good deal, Andrew.
Oh, well, it was actually last night, Dan.
No way.
Yeah.
This was not in any way premeditated, by the way.
Oh, well, last night we went to Long Acres Ice Cream up on Route 100. Very good ice cream.
Very good.
And you can get something called a garbage sundae, which sounds terrible.
It sounds like it's not worth the deal.
It might sound like that, but you get 10 scoops of ice cream.
Oh my God.
Each scoop is filled with whipped cream and cherries, and then you get 10 toppings, which we got all on the side in about cups that are about this big and this tall. So like 2 cups of peanut butter sauce, 3 cups of hot fudge, mini Reese's, chocolate chips, M&Ms, gummy bears, brownie bites, all for a whopping total of $14.
What?
Yes.
Bro, that is a deal.
That's a deal, right? I'm a little nervous saying it here because I think they're going to raise the price or stop it, but we were literally sitting at our table at Long Acres. This lady walked by and she had 2 sundaes in her hand. She probably paid $12, $13 total, and whoever's with her is like, we're going to get that next time. She went back in. She said, and she came out angrily and said, $14, and walked out.
Like indignant?
Indignant that she paid almost the same amount and didn't get close to the amount. So we actually brought home 3 to 4 scoops of ice cream and most of the toppings for $14.
Question.
Okay.
You brought ice cream home.
Yeah, Angela actually brought a little cooler because she knew we were going to have leftover ice cream. Even though 5 of us, we couldn't eat the 10 scoops.
Right.
She knew we were going to bring it home. So now we're going to have another, ice cream bar at another point with all the toppings.
That is a deal.
A deal.
Wow. Andrew, we're talking about wisdom and wealth, the parable of the shrewd manager. I have to admit, this parable confounded me for a very long time. Especially, so we're in Luke 16, verse 9. Honestly, up until yesterday, really escaped me in terms of what point Jesus was making here. Because in actuality, as you read this parable, we're kind of getting into some unethical behavior that seems to be commended by Jesus, right?
Well, I think Pastor Joe said something interesting that I'd never heard before. He said this guy was possibly taking out his commission or cut.
I had never heard that before either. And I thought that was a very interesting way to explain kind of that reduction of, it's a fire sale of the boss's resources.
Yeah. And I think that's a very convenient way to make it, to put a bow on it and tie it up. I'm not convinced. Like, it didn't seem like that's the idea all the way around. And I think Jesus was telling the story. Let's remember, right? It didn't actually happen.
Right.
It didn't actually happen. It's a story about something that could happen. And I think what the boss was seeing and what Jesus was commending, right, was the shrewdness of the person to take care of themselves, not necessarily the ethical behavior. And I don't think in the story it's, hey, repeat this behavior.
Right.
Right? It's, hey, this attitude of looking forward and planning ahead is what you need to have. right? As a person of God's kingdom.
One of the other things I thought of yesterday as we were reading the story was, I wonder, again, you're right, this story did not happen.
Didn't happen.
Right? So
yes.
we could talk about it as if it was a real scenario. It was not. But I wonder if in this fictitious story, if the manager, because the way Joe kind of flipped it and talked about the CFO, who was bad at his job, I wonder if the situation could have been like this manager was actually bad at his job and wasn't collecting anything. And then as this situation is unfolding in his life, he actually started to collect something from the debtors. And if the manager was like, oh, wow, when the fire really got under you, you actually performed and did some of your job.
Yeah. I mean, I think, right, the stress, sometimes we always see stress as a bad thing, but sometimes it does motivate us.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting Jesus used the word shrewd. At least that was in there, because when he sent his disciples out, I think it was in Matthew, when he sent his disciples out, Matthew 10, actually, he said, I want you to be shrewd as snakes, but gentle as doves.
Yeah.
So this wasn't the first time Jesus was commending people for being shrewd, or saying, hey, we actually probably need to be more shrewd. But when he said that, he said, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. And being shrewd doesn't necessarily mean, right? Shrewd, you're planning, you're making things work out, but it doesn't mean you're taking advantage of other people.
And I think that word can sometimes have that connotation, at least linguistically, as we use it. Shrewd kind of is like, I don't know if I want to be that, because it, at least in my usage of it, would imply that you are winning against someone else.
Yeah, someone
right?
else is losing
Yeah.
if you're winning. But he said, shrewd as snakes, but gentle as doves. So be shrewd, but make sure you stay innocent.
And the definition here of shrewd, wise, prudent, or having practical intelligence. And that's what we see here. The other thing we see here is the urgency of the situation, right? The manager, he knows that his employment's going to end. And so there's an urgency in his situation. And kind of pointing this forward to the gospel, Andrew, I think sometimes we don't realize the urgency of the situation, and not only the urgency for ourselves, but the urgency also for others and for the sake of our world and culture as it relates to the gospel.
Yeah. I mean, it's really easy to say, hey, my life is busy. I got things. And if I have time, right, I'll share with someone, or I'll care with someone. But I think your urgency really comes down to your love for people.
Yeah.
And if there's not an urgency there, it's maybe a warning sign to say maybe your heart is cold towards people.
Whoa.
Because when we look around, we live in the same neighborhood, right? We see a lot of the same people, but when we look at them and we're like, oh yeah, they're not close to Jesus, but you know what? That's actually not on my radar. That's not important to me, or it's not enough for me to take time out to go talk to someone. And I'm not saying you need to go and be like, hey, do you know about Jesus? But you guys are really strategic about building relationships. And I try to be strategic because we're looking for those opportunities that say, hey, I actually love you and I want you to know Jesus. But when we don't have urgency, it's probably because we're consumed with our own lives too much and like seeking our kingdom instead of God's kingdom.
That hurts a little bit.
It does.
Because I think we can tend to live these insular lives. We do think a lot about our own stuff that we have going on, our comfort, those kinds of things. And it does impact also the way that we utilize our finances. And that's kind of the frame that we're looking at this message through as we're talking about kingdom builders. I love the John Piper quote, what am I doing with my money now that will matter 10,000 years from today?
Dan, that quote and Joe's sermon really got me thinking, like, okay, what am I doing with my money that will matter 5 years from now, right?
Yeah.
So not just retirement investment or kids education fund or whatnot, but like, how's my money going to make a difference 5 years from now, 40 years from now? And those are great questions. And I'm like, okay, these are really good questions. But then 10,000 years, 100,000 years, a million years, isn't it amazing to think that we could actually make an investment today that people will remember, that will make an impact in someone's life?
Is that hyperbole, though, Andrew? I mean, could money that you or I or Connection Church invests in the kingdom, how is it possible that it could have an impact 10,000, 100,000, or a million years from today?
I think the most obvious answer, right, is if we can, like Pastor Joe preached about a couple weeks ago with Romans 10, if we can send people out who share the good news with someone in another country or someone in another context that we'll never know, and they meet Jesus, we don't know what kind of an impact that one person will have on the community around them. Like, I'll give you an example. There's a lady in our church. She moved here from Africa, but she was a Muslim. She was reached by people who knew Jesus, and now she just told me 2 weeks ago. Now I think it's up to 3 or 4 people in her family know Jesus, coming from completely Muslim context, completely non-Christian, and I think her kids and their grandkids are coming to know Christ, and I think we discount how much one person's life changing can change a community, can change other people. And I do think when we meet people in heaven, right, the hope is, and Joe said this, when we get there, there's going to be a crowd of people that we've never met who are going to say, thank you for giving because you impacted my life.
That sounds too good to be true, but it's not. Like, you're sitting here talking about this, and I'm thinking about friends of mine who currently live in Cairo. They are originally from Switzerland and Germany, and they lived in Sudan for a lot of years. And these were pretty intense situations that they were living in. They got evacuated about 12 years ago out of there, and that's how they ended up in Cairo, living on the end of a street where the water a couple days a week for an hour or two would turn on at the beginning of their neighborhood, and it would come down the pipe. It would fill up the tank on the top of the house, and then it would go to the next one, and they were at the end of the lane. And they had multiple kids. I think they had 4 or 5 kids at the time. And the wife, so this is a Muslim culture. Women are not regarded extremely highly in that culture. And she started a Jesus revolution among Muslim women. And there were literally 200 women that had come to faith in Christ, which would be like, honestly, like a mega church,
yes,
in that context, and have continued to come to Christ as a result of her ministry. And so people that support this family have an interest, right? You talk about investment. So they have a share, they're a stakeholder, they're a shareholder in this enterprise, in this missions enterprise.
Wow.
And they are people that are giving are responsible for that return on that investment, which is just an incredible gospel proclamation and transformation of that community among those women in Sudan.
Dan, that's so motivating.
And they're no longer there, right? They've been in Cairo for 12 years, 13 years, and yet that is still continuing, and that investment is still reaping returns. This happens hundreds and thousands of times through the gospel partners that we have, the missionaries that we support throughout the world, and through the projects that we're supporting through Kingdom Builders.
Dan, my wife and I, we're obviously looking for a deal, right? And we're looking for the best deal because we're actually trying to find the best investment for our money. But I would say that kind of mission, those kind of people, I would say I want a piece of that.
Yeah.
And we would use that term in our family to say, like, I want a piece of that. Like, I want to be a part of that. I want to give to that because there's something that this money, and Joe talked about this, right? This money's not my money.
Yep.
It's been given to me to use for the most impact. And I'd be like, oh, do I want to invest in something like that? Yeah. I want a piece of that.
There's something, and I know I'm in good company in talking about this topic,
Yeah.
because we do love to invest in gospel projects. We've been in rooms before where we've been presented with opportunities to invest in gospel projects. And there is just something really motivating about being able to push something over the line or have a piece of that action, right?
Yes.
To make something happen. And sitting in my seat, so some of what I do here at Connection Church is I talk to a lot of missionaries, and we get together and we try to discern missionaries that we're going to partner with on a monthly basis. But also, I get to look around for the projects that we're going to support. So the projects that are in the Kingdom Builders book, I'm very invested in those projects because they are projects that we've vetted here internally, and that we're going to really be able to make a pretty sizable impact. So one of the projects that we're going to be supporting is in Vanuatu. It's an island nation. Maybe you've never heard of it, Andrew.
I've never heard of it. Papua New Guinea, I know whatever the word you said is. Yeah.
Yeah, so similar part of the world.
Okay.
There's a church there that was destroyed by an earthquake several years ago, an international church that was destroyed by an earthquake. And they are raising $55,000 to could you imagine rebuilding our building for $55,000?
Nope. Nope.
So we've made a commitment to give 20% of that to rebuild that church. And so, just imagine, this place that no one thinks about.
Nope.
Except, I do know that Alicia Wofford went on a mission trip there. I think it was her first mission trip was there.
Wow.
And so, not many people think about a place like this, but we are able to have a sizable interest in this gospel proclamation work in a place that most of us will never get to.
We'll never hear about.
Probably never hear about.
Never hear about.
But we get to really play a sizable role in helping to rebuild this church.
Oh, Dan, there is nothing more exciting in my mind than seeing God's kingdom move forward and saying, thank you, God, for letting me be a part of that.
So maybe talking about it like this is enough, but how can people be motivated to think about it in this way? It excites me. I love having the opportunity to see a need. There's going to be something we're going to be talking about in over the next couple of weeks that we are partnering with right now in another small island nation in Asia Pacific. I don't want to give it away because we're going to talk about it in our services, but I just love when there's an opportunity, and even I love when the missionaries are like, here's the ask. And it's more than they could expect to be able to provide out of the budget that they've already raised. And I love being able to say to these missionaries, hey, we got you.
Yeah.
We got you. And so the project we're going to be talking about, we've fully funded. And it's a really exciting opportunity that we have to reach into not just a small island nation, but many island nations. And how can people get excited to participate in these things, Andrew?
Yeah, I think you have to know what your life is about and keep reframing your life around, hey, the biggest impact I'm going to make in my life is not just on the people around me, but the people God enables me to reach beyond. And I think it means looking at your budget, Dan, and saying, can we afford?
Right? That's good.
Not can we afford, but can we trust God that if we give this extra money to Kingdom Builders above and beyond our tithe, that he's not only going to provide for us, but he could use it to provide for other people. And I think it's a step of faith continually. And it is an adventure, and you and I both know when you give, God does provide for you. And
every time.
And not going to get too much into my personal finances, but I've seen...
Oh, please, Andrew, open them up.
I've seen my family and I give in some ways, and then I'm like, wow, how do we still have more, and God keeps providing, and we're not rich by any means, but as we keep giving, God keeps providing, and he passes money through our hands because that's all it is, right? It's just coming through our hands. It's not ours to give. It's coming through our hands to make an impact in the world.
I can't think of much more exciting things to do with money than to give it away for purposes like this, honestly. And I hope you guys can hear that. Like, This is true excitement. And I mentioned it at the very beginning of the Kingdom Builder series when Joe was here, that this is not a ploy. This isn't a tactic or a technique. Like, we're not trying to drum up business or this isn't a fundraiser. This isn't a capital campaign.
It's not to get a better studio for something like this. Like, it has nothing to do with us here.
Nothing to do with us. This is all about shoveling money out the door, mobilizing people. Like, could you imagine what we could do together for the sake of the gospel? And we love to do it personally. And we love to do it as a church. And so I really hope and pray that this really deeply becomes part of the DNA, that the excitement can be caught, that like, this is exciting to be able to have a piece of this action.
Yes, man, Jesus said something that we never read in any of the Gospels that he said, but the Apostle Paul says in the book of Acts. He says, the Lord said it's better to give than receive. And I think if you're a giver, if you're generous, that's true because of your experience.
And when a business gives a deal, it's equally as good to receive.
Yeah, I love receiving it. I'm going to continue to receive from Longacres. Thank you so much.
Well, and Andrew, maybe you could give us some of that leftover ice cream. On second thought, we're good. This has been another episode of The Second Look. You can catch this sermon and much more at our website, cometoconnect.com. Have a great week.